In this video, we are going to show you how to associate a DNS name with your Amazon server. It's pretty straightforward. To begin with, we'll take a look at what instances I have open. I've got several running instances right now. I have 2 test servers in Oregon that we're going to work with, Test Server Oregon 1, Test Server Oregon 2, and I also have a test server in Ireland as well. I go up here, I'll select Europe, Ireland, and I can see that I've got a test server in Ireland. There's my Ireland test server. I can run these by the URL that's down here. Here I've got my test server Oregon 1. All it is a nano instance in Amazon Web Services, and I've added a quick little HTML clip in there that prints out test server Oregon 1. I've also got test server Oregon 2, and I've got my test server in Ireland. Now, none of these have pleasant URLs whatsoever. How could I actually get a URL that I like with a domain that I want? That's pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and switch our services. We're going to switch over to Route 53. Route 53 is what Amazon uses for domain name services. The name comes because all of the domain name services run on TCP IP port 53. The web services run on port 80. Encrypted web runs on port 443, just in case you're curious. Okay, in this case I've got 6 hosted zones. I can click on them, and I've got Arcade Academy, Program Arcade Games, Stat Support. I'm going to mess around with webdev.training, a domain that I've got. Let's get things set up so that I can add some DNS names for this to associate with my servers. So to begin with, I take a look at the different names that I've got. So with this, I have, let me minimize this a little bit here, make it easier to read. Okay, I've got webdev.training, and the primary one that I have already set up is the Start of Authority record, SOA record. This is really where everything, well, starts with the DNS. You need to have one of these, and Amazon kind of helps you get this set up when you create it. But this basically states this is going to be my main name server, and I've got several other timings that are put in here that tells how often it should come back and recheck these records. In addition to my Start of Authority record, I also have a name server record. This is very similar to the Start of Authority record. However, the Start of Authority record is where things start, and then I look up names off of the different domain name servers that are listed here. It is possible to have multiple zones, in which case you could have multiple NS records. You don't normally, or at least not that I've ever used. But whenever the client computer wants to look up, for instance, test1.webdev.training, it's going to go to one of these name servers. So it could go to the one in the UK, it could go to this .com, this .org, or this .net one. Amazon spreads the name servers out across multiple TLDs. Just in case one TLD goes down, we've got the other ones that we can go to. It's able to look up the name server records on any of these 4 computers. They're all basically redundant backups. I also already have created an alias. This is just if you happen to go to webdev.training. If you go to webdev.training, I have a certain type of record called an A record. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but this A record associates with an IP address. And your main domain record, that is one without a computer associated with it, that is, if you just go to simpson.edu instead of www.simpson.edu, so if you just have the domain.com, or in this case webdev.training, and you want to go to a machine without adding additional things to the beginning of your DNS record, you need to have an A-type record and associate it with an IP address. The weird thing about this is that really Amazon in particular with their cloud services doesn't like you associating particular DNS names with IP addresses, because it is possible that your machine's IP address could change if they need to. And if your IP address changes, then people will no longer be able to get to your server. So that runs into a little bit of a problem with if they don't want you to use an IP address, and if with like address name webdev.training you need to associate it with an IP address. How do you get around that? We use an alias. We check the little box right here, and I've got an alias for another computer that's set up. We're going to start things from scratch, so I'm not going to worry as much about this, but we will get to an explanation of that in the videos. So at any rate, I'm going to create a new record set. I'm going to call this test-oregon-1 webdev.training. I'm going to make this a canonical name. Then I'm going to go over here to, looks like I need to create a new tab here. Duplicate this tab. I'm going to flip over to EC2. Flip from Ireland back to Oregon. Look at my test Oregon server 1. Sort here. Here's my test server Oregon 1. I've got my URL down here. I'm going to copy this. Flip back over here to the Route 53 management, and I'm going to paste it in here. So with a CNAME type record, I can basically say if you go to testoregon1.webdev.training, then you're going to go to this address instead. I'm going to go ahead and create this. And now I've got testoregon1.webdev.training should go to this particular address. Let's give it a try. Hey, there we go. That was actually pretty quick. testoregon1.webdev.training now associates with our test Oregon 1 server. Great, let's create another one. I'm going to create a new record set. This time I'm going to call it test-oregon-2.webdev.training. I'm going to, instead of a CNAME, I'm going to use an IP address. I'm going to show you how to do it the other way. What's my IP address of this machine? Aha, here's the IP address. Again, Amazon really doesn't recommend you do it this way because the IP address could change, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. So if I've got an IP address that I know is not going to change, I can just use an A record, associate the name with the IP address, create it. I now have testoregon2.webdev.training. Let's go ahead and copy this, create a new tab, paste it in here. Looks like I got an extra period. Get rid of that. Try it out. And there we go. I've got my test server Oregon 1. Now I put in test Oregon 2. What was my mistake? Well, pretty simply, I copied the IP address of test Oregon 1 server. So if I flip over here to test Oregon 2, I can see I have a different IP address. I copy this. I flip over to my Route 53 management, and I need to edit this record. So I can paste in the new IP address. Now, if you know how the DNS server works, you already can realize that something is going to happen that's not going to work the way I want it to. I'm going to save this record set. I can see that I've got this new IP right here. If I go back over here, refresh this page, I don't go to Oregon 2. You'll remember that basically when I do a DNS request, it can cache that info for at least 24 hours. You can set the basic timings as to how long it caches it. And in fact, those timings right here, time to live, looks like 1 minute, 5 minutes. So actually in about 5 minutes, if I refresh that page, it should actually go to the test Oregon 2 server. Okay, through the magic of video editing, it is now 5 minutes later. Let's go ahead and hit refresh on this and see if we are going to go to test server Oregon 2. Hey, there we are. 5 minutes later, it went and did the DNS lookup again, and we are now on test server Oregon 2 with our test Oregon 2 address.